the number of nodes or degrees of freedom, of course, your solution time will drastically increase with the 3D mesh. But what is the other factor which is important is how my results are, right? That is the major important thing. I can go with the 2D mesh, but if my result quality is very low, then of course I need to, even though the computationally it is time consuming, I need to go with the 3D mesh. So just it is a comparison. So just in this slide, you can see like for the same element size, you can see what is the drastic increase in mesh size of that you can directly correlate it with the analysis time compared to the 2D mesh. Can you go to the next slide? So you can see the comparison between these two, like the top is the like the top figure is the total deformation with the 3D solid, and bottom one is the total deformation, directional deformation in the Z direction with respect to the shell mesh, which means we have very less quantities of mesh or like the element size. You can see that in terms of maximum deformation, it approximately they are almost the same. Like we are not compromising on the results. But we had reduced the simulation time by almost 3.24 times just by choosing the appropriate element size based on the geometry we are using, right? Similarly, in terms of stress also, we have stress of 962 MPa over there in the shell mesh or solid mesh, but you will have approximately the same. Yeah, there will be a minor difference, but approximately the same within less plus or minus 5% or engineering standard, so that we are not compromising on the results. At the same time, we are speeding up the simulation by almost 4 times. So this will be major helpful if you want to do some design parametric studies by changing the length of the beam or varying the forces. You want to study how many stresses are varying. So in that time, it will make a very huge impact on your simulation time. So this case will, I think, will give you some idea like what is the importance of studying your CAD model, which helps you to choose the appropriate elements for modeling the structure. So without compromising on the accuracy. So can you go to the next slide? So the next one is same. It is a fatigue analysis of ARM, which is used to connect the vehicle, the wheel with the frame. So in this, so there are different types of forces applied on this, and when the vehicle is subjected to different sort of maneuvers, right? There are like axial loading, braking force, cornering force, etc. Bumps when you're hitting the bump. There are different types of loads acting on it. Even though if you define, so the main purpose of this second case study or the second application is to, even though if your stresses are within the limit, for example, if your stress limit for that for this ARM, let's assume the ARM is like 300 or 500 megapascal, and by applying on all the load, if your stresses are well below, like let's say like 100 megapascal or 75 megapascal, something like that. So you can directly say my factor of safety is high. Of course, my structure is going to be safe, right? But the fatigue analysis, in the what case we will do, we want to do with a large scale perspective. Like for example, if I keep on, like when I'm using the structure or when my using the vehicle for like 5 years, 6 years, or like several years, what will happen to this one? Like what is the lifetime of this? Even though the stresses are very less compared to the material limit, what is the lifetime of the structure, which is very important. That will help you to accordingly plan the maintenance, right? Because like after some time you need to do the maintenance. So when you have a clear idea what is the lifetime of the structure, in that case we will do the fatigue study. So that will give what should be my maintenance schedule for that vehicle, right? In that perspective, fatigue analysis plays a major role. So even though you satisfied your static conditions or static factor of safety, dynamic factor of safety, etc., in order to fix the maintenance schedule, the important factor is to have the fatigue study. Can you go to the next slide? So what is the material property required for doing the dynamic analysis, for doing the static analysis for the isotropic material? We said Young's modulus and Poisson's ratio are required. So that has to come from the testing, and your entire results are depends on that, right? What is the material property inputted? Similarly, if you want to calculate the lifetime of the structure, you need to have the SN curve data. So that has to come from the experimental or test setup. So usually the provider providing the component or the material will have this data. So you can get those data and you can directly input in the ANSYS for your fatigue calculation setup. So in addition to elastic properties, you need the SN curve data if you want to determine the fatigue life. Can you go to the next slide? So first, what we will do for doing the fatigue life. So we had taken that. So we had taken a component of the arm and we did the static analysis with all those forces. I'm not talking about what are the forces we applied, but we just did the static analysis as we discussed in the case 1, right? And you see the total maximum stress is 150 MPa. But what is the yield strength of the material is 250 MPa. So if you calculate the factor of safety, yes, it seems the structure is safe, right? So there is no issue with that structure. But as I mentioned, when we do the fatigue calculation, can you go to the next slide? So this is how we need to, so next slide, please. So you can see like in the top, you can see the factor of safety with fatigue. So there, like it's mostly like most of the regions have the very high good factor of safety. But when you come to fatigue life, you can see there are some cycles like 4651 cycles. So there are some regions where we need to concentrate on it. So depending on the life, the cycles, it can like 4.275 cycles. You need to replace this component, or you need to investigate this component whether there is any fracture happened or cracks are propagating or not. So the fatigue life become very much important quantity when you want to like inspect the schedule the inspection of your structure or your vehicle, or to provide like the schedule for your service of your vehicle, etc. In that scenario, these are very important because even though it is satisfying this factor of safety, but in terms of fatigue life, we need to calculate X. We cannot say this component will not fail even if you use it for like very long years, like more than like 50-20 years. It's not having the infinite life. Every component has the infinite life that is governed by its fatigue parameters. And through simulation, we need to identify the parameters in order to establish the maintenance schedule or the inspection schedule. Can you go to the next slide? So the next one is topology optimization. So first application is demonstrating what is the use of appropriately studying your model and choosing the element type so that we can have a good accuracy without compromising on the with high computational speed. And the second one, we concentrated on the fatigue life to mainly it will help to set the inspection schedule or the maintenance schedule. The next one is the topology optimization. For example, initially if you are going to a design phase, first you will initially define based on the hand calculation, right? And once you did the hand calculation, what next thing you will do is like you will take that component, do the static structural analysis or a detailed analysis, and you will identify the structure. But most of the engineers, what they will do, just they will concentrate on the where is the maximum stress occurring. Of course, that is an important point, but they don't concentrate on the region where the minimum stress is occurring or where the stress is 0 or something like that. Okay, so in that scenario, like, but if you look at it, if you want to make the structure more robust or something like that, or more efficient, what you need to do, you need to take the material from the region where the stresses are very low, and then you need to replace add those material in the region where the maximum stresses, so that the region where is having the maximum stress will have more material or more amount of material. The stress will be decreased. Of course, the region where you taken the stress material is a low stress region. So of course, it will not have any impact on your simulation. So if you are manufacturing a component, as you may see, there is a original part. And if you are doing topology optimization, you are saving lot of amount of material with increasing in stiffness and reducing the stress, right? So in that way, you are benefiting in both the perspective. You are increasing the stiffness of the material and also you are reducing the manufacturing cost. So that is the way, that is the one of the main help or like main thing people will do to optimize the components, so that they will mainly redistribute the materials or they will remove the materials with the aim of improving the structural stiffness and reducing the manufacturing cost. Can you go to the next slide? So in this, what we had taken a very simple arm, or where we subjected to fixed support. You can see at the top, A is the fixed support, and B, we applied the forces. So this is the initial component we had taken, like based on like design study or hand calculation, to fit into your entire assembly, right? So we applied the forces. We are doing the static structural analysis. Can you go to the next slide? And we are taking out the stresses. So can you previous slide? Sorry. And in that region, if you see that figure, like in the top left corner, if you see that figure, you see the stresses are only along those edges. The middle region is not contributing to the structure in carrying the load, right? So the whatever material in this blue region or the thick blue region is not really important. It's not having any sense. It's just adding your mass to the structure, but it is not helping in any stiffness, like increasing the structural stiffness or the like the redistributing the stresses. So if you see from this figure, like instead of concentrating on the max, if you concentrate on the minimum stress, you can clearly say the material in this region can be removed, so that my structure will be less weight and I am not compromising on any of the on the stiffness and the strength of the structure, right? So this is a main parameter which we also need to consider for a efficient design. So it is not only you are designing the structure for a given load, you also make sure the structure is not over designed. You are using the optimized materials or the structure so that it can serve the purpose, but at the same time you need to ensure the structure is not over designed. Can you just go to the next one? So this is like once you did the static structural analysis, there is a topology optimization in the workbench. You need to drag and drop. What it will do, it will take all these geometries, model and the solution from the static structure. So you don't need to do anything. Everything is automated inside the ANSYS. So yeah, all the data will be transferred to the topology optimization, as you can see. Then you need to set of objectives and constraints. What is the objective? Here the objective is I need to reduce the mass of the entire component by 50%. Okay, what is the constraint? I need to say in the process of reducing this mass, I should not have the stress more than, let's say, 150 megapascal or 200 megapascal. So you need to say, set the constraint, because it will keep on reducing the mass, and if your stresses are going beyond your material strength, then it is no point in optimization, right? So you need to set two things. One is you need to check what is my objective, like what I'm intended to do. I'm going to reduce the mass by at least 50%. And my constraint is, while you are doing optimization, make sure. So these two things you need to set the objective and constraint. The remaining thing, the ANSYS will do it for you. Can you go to the next slide? So this, as I said, like you need to set the objectives and constraints. Then once you did it, what will happen? It will do the like topology optimization, and it will remove the material wherever it is not required. Okay. So finally, you will see the results, and you can export the result to the space client, because like you can smoothen out the geometry for manufacturing, etc. Like, because you cannot use the same geometry if it is curvy or something. You can take the optimized geometry to space client, which is a CAD software for smoothing the geometry, which you got it from the like after topology optimization. You can see, as expected, the material in these regions are removed. So you are saving like a lot of materials while manufacturing, when you are manufacturing the component on large numbers. So once it is done, what you need to do for a second check, you need to take these components which you edited in the space client, which you come from the. So the component, what you are doing is like you are doing the static structural, transferring to topology optimization, and then you are getting that optimized component. You are taking to the space client for geometry editing, and then you are again bringing back to the static structural, reapply the loads and see whether the stress is within the limit or not. So this is a second level check to make sure the optimized geometry is not having a really high stress that leads to the failure of the component. So it is like a 3-4 step process: static, topology optimization, geometry editing, and redoing the static structural on the optimized geometry for the second level check. So can you go to the next one?
Shall I again move forward?
Yeah,
Yes,
you
sir?
can move forward. These are just yeah. How
Okay. Yeah.
Then other one is like a altogether a different analysis. The last three we started only with the static structural analysis, or like by applying the mechanical loads, forces, or moments, etc. So this one is like a thermal analysis of a disc brake. So when you have a like even a drum brake, etc. So what happens, like when you are applying the brake, there is a lot of heat is generated on your disc, right? So this heat might contribute to your failure of the system. So it is not only the static structural or static simulation doesn't not always limited to the applying forces and moments, but sometimes for especially the brake type of components, you need to consider the thermal effects also, or you need to study the thermal effects also, or else you may end up in your wrong conclusion, right? So you already aware of this material. So like disc brake, which you have. So the disc brake mainly works on the principle of friction. So when you are to reduce the vehicle speed, the friction will be established between the tires and the disc brake, and the vehicle will be reduced. In that scenario, there is a large amount of heat is generated, and it will be like the disc brakes will be heated up because it is made up of cast iron, or sometimes it is made up of composite material. So this temperature, when the temperature becomes very high, that leads to failure in the disc. Failure of the brake, so which has a very negative consequence on your design, right? So can you go to the next slide? So similar to what you are seeing, like in static structural analysis, you need Young's modulus and Poisson's ratio for defining the study the like how stresses and strains. Similarly, if you want to do the thermal analysis, you need to have thermal conductivity for steady state analysis. If you are doing transient thermal, then you need to have specific heat coefficient. But for doing the thermal analysis to predict what is the temperature distribution happening, then you need to have the thermal conductivity as your material property that has to come from the experimental or test data. So it's actually the similar, you can directly have the engineering data option inside the workbench, those who are familiar with, and you can just drag and drop it on your material and you can enter those property accordingly. So can you go to the next slide? So in this, what we had done, we already have like, so this, there is one way of doing is like you can do the transient analysis, and you can define the friction, and you can calculate the heat flux, and you can apply the heat flux. So that is a complete end-to-end simulation. But in this scenario, what we did, like we already know what is the heat flux generated when the braking is applied on a vehicle at a given speed. So we note the input, what is the heat flux generated on this one. So you can see that blue color. So we applied that heat flux on this. That is like a heat flux is nothing but like you can directly correlate to pressure in the static structural analysis. So we are applying the heat flux on this side, which we already know, and we are applying the convection because the heat will be dissipated, right? It will not remain big due to that convection. Like we have three modes of heat transfer. One is conduction, convection, and radiation. Since the disc breaks, the temperature is not going really high where the radiation comes into picture. We can safely eliminate the radiation. So we are considering two modes of heat transfer. One is conduction, so which is transferring across the materials from the outer corner, and the other one is convection, where the heat is dissipated from the disc brake to the outer environment. So we are defining the two loading scenarios. Can you go to the next slide? So finally, we are identifying what is the, like you are seeing what is the maximum stress here, and you can see still these regions are not reaching the very high limit. So you can clearly depict this temperature distribution for when it is subjected to a corresponding heat flux. So if you want to study further, what you can do is like you can take the temperature to static structural analysis. So you can see like what is the due to this temperature distribution, what are the stresses created inside this disc brake or inside the disc brake. Okay, so this, and you can apply the load. So you have the complete scenario, complete realistic scenario. So you are considering the effect of temperature and also considering the effect of force. So that will give you accurate stresses so that to correlate with the physical test or in the realistic scenario. So that will give you a better estimation. Okay. But in this part we didn't have this we didn't do the static structural analysis or structural analysis by mapping the temperature, but that is easily doable in ANSYS. So the main part of this last case study is to give, like, depending on the component, it is all, not only the forces are important, sometimes the temperature effect needs to be considered while designing the component. Next slide. So I think that's all from my side. Just we discussed like 4 cases, and I hope it helped. 4 things are different. It's not related to, but each having its own message, so that you can take this into account while designing your structure via simulation. Thanks, Mayank.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for the for very good explanation on the case studies, and even the applicability also you have pretty well explained. I would say we will take 5 minutes for break for this questionnaire session. So if anybody has any question, please unmute yourself and you can speak. After 5 minutes, we will again start with the explicit analysis. Hello.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I want to ask that what FOS fatigue tool value we should consider but for analysis of different different components. On which basis the FOS value should.
Rituja, could you please repeat
the value
again?
of FOS should be taken.
Your voice is a little bit breaking.
Sir,
Yeah.
during analysis, what FOS value for fatigue tool is desirable for different components?
Jason, is the question clear to you?
So your question is what fatigue value in the sense like life or like what exactly you are trying to say?
Not life, not life. In fatigue tool, the FOS value.
Factor of safety, she meant to say.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So factor of safety value. So actually, I'm not sure like what different components have those. Mayank, can you just answer this?
Yeah, basically the FOS is like similar for all the components. Like if you have stress, or maybe if you have one factor of safety, that means you are working on a yield range or something. And if you have more than one for your stresses, whichever are coming into the component, is like on a safer side you are working. So I don't think there is like any specific FOS for fatigue components.
Mayank, sorry, I joined just now, and if I may add from my own experience.
Yeah. Hi, Abhimanyu.
Yeah, hi, Mayank and Jayaprakash. So regarding fatigue, I can add from my own experience of what I have seen people follow, and also from my previous experience in previous organization. So fatigue, generally the data itself is not, you can say, we don't have a very accurate data from the test. It is always coming in a sigma level, right? We have 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma level variations of a fatigue property. And then we have underlying assumptions of various factors that we take into consideration. So when we model for fatigue life, these assumptions basically play a key role in having a factor of safety closer to 1. Ideally, as Mayank said, anything above greater than 1 means infinite life. So infinite, we tend to put it to 10 raised power 6, 10 raised power 7, depending on what component you are selecting, ferrous or non-ferrous. But what I have seen is if you have fairly accurate material property, maybe you will not be testing all the components that you select for fatigue properties, because the testing itself is quite expensive. So you tend to select something around 1.6 or greater than 1.6. But if you don't have the property at all, and if you start with the assumption of deriving a property from, say, UTS data or yield strength, and there is no fatigue curve like SN curve that is present. So you may have to push to higher factor of safety. So something greater than 2 maybe. So that depends on the information that you have on hand and what are your modeling assumptions. Depending on that, anything greater than 1.6 is what I have seen people consider for fatigue. But definitely not 1 because of all the uncertainty in terms of material properties at room temperature. Then there is a strain hardening effect, and also definitely people don't just select 1. They go greater than 1.6, provided they have accurate property available. I hope that answers your questions at least partially.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Any other question do we have?
Can you explain the concept of bearing load?
Jaisan?
Oh, sir. Can you repeat it again?
Can you explain the concept of bearing load?
So bearing load, what you are trying to say is like with respect to ANSYS, like you want to apply bearing or bearing load within the static structure.
Yeah, I mean, what forces will come while we choose the constraint of bearing load in ANSYS?
So if you want to model the bearing in ANSYS, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So actually in the bearing, we will take 3 stiffness. So depending on the stiffness, you will get like, except in the axial direction, you will get all those forces as a reaction. So what is the input is like you need to give the stiffness in all those directions that you have to get from the manufacturer in defining the bearings. Hello, that answers your question?
Yes, sir. Fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can look into that manual. Like, so it will directly say what are the inputs you require, because we are not directly model the bearing as I mentioned. We are modeling through the numerical quantities. So you need those stiffness values and those things. So once you based on the stiffness value, you will get the reaction forces in all those directions except in axial.
Okay, sir.
So is there any other question, or shall we quickly move to explicit analysis? We have already passed our 5-minute allocated time.
Yeah, I think Mike, we can move to explicit, and the end we might have some
Okay.
It depends on the time we can have that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jay. Let's just look into the explicit concept. So basically, when I say explicit analysis, quickly it comes into picture that we may have role of time or something. So let us look into the detail of basics and applications. So first, I just have one question in mind. Like we have seen many concepts, as Jaisan also explained about the static things, and also first thing which comes in my mind: why do we discretize the geometry? Why we want to discretize it? So the answer to this is, let's suppose you have an object which has some arbitrarily shape or maybe real life shape, and that's a continuous system, and you want to find out the solution. Maybe if you are doing some different analysis on that object, maybe some static analysis, you are doing some thermal analysis or any kind of analysis, or integrity, structure integrity and all, if you are doing. So you want to understand why, like how the effects are coming, and what and all things you should consider, and all these things. So everything is there, but how to understand, like how to apply those things and how to extract the result. So for complex analysis, we already know we use differential equations to integrate or differentiate various quantities over a domain. So the idea of discretization here is, let's suppose you have this object, and let's suppose the shape is unknown to you, so you don't know the various relations, like your area or volume. You are not aware of those relations directly, like integrate directly related those parameters and all. So how you will define, how will you extract the result? So then there comes the phenomena of discretization. Let's suppose this is geometry is there, you will discretize it with known shapes. So let's suppose here I have discretized it with known shape of 3 triangles. So I know the area and everything, and I know the parameter relations. So I can simply extract the results with these known quantities. So same way we have discretized this object with elements and nodes. So these will make you these two system will give you discrete system, and discretization is done. Same way, like for a right hand side, if you see a rim is there, so that also the shape is unknown to you. So how you have done is you have simply meshed it with the tet element, or if it is shell modeling, then you can simply put tria or hexa, tria or quad. So this is just for a brief glimpse why we do discretization of the geometry. Okay, so now let us see. First, we have seen the implicit concept like static analysis and all. So now we see the time scale of the analysis, or maybe the problems which we face nowadays in real life scenarios. So when I talk about the time scale of problem, so we have different type of analysis, or maybe the analysis of static analysis and all. So first comes the creep phenomena, and then comes static or dynamic analysis. Then we have quasi-static analysis. Then we have drop test, ballistic test, detonation, hypervelocity impact. So one thing you might have noticed that when I am moving from left to right, I can see the velocity, or maybe the speed of the phenomena happening is increasing. So when I say speed is increasing, the speed is increasing. So the same way non-linearity is coming into the picture. So when non-linearity is coming into the picture, so these things we can if non-linearity is coming, then we have to define those problems, or we have to extract the solution in a more controlled way, or you can say more careful way. So if you see the problem time magnitude of these problems, so let's suppose creep usually happens within a year. This is a long term process, whereas you have static analysis, dynamic analysis, that is sometimes it will be in a seconds, or it can go up to milliseconds. Like this hypervelocity impact can happen in a millisecond time. Same way we have this crash phenomena that also happens sometimes in milliseconds. So that is sometimes this is simply just to explain the scale of the problem. So now here comes how we decide the implicit analysis we have to put, or maybe explicit analysis we have to put. We have to do. So implicit is like when you have phenomena which is like not dependent on your mass, or maybe it is long-term phenomena where your inertial effects are not coming into the picture. So that way we can use implicit analysis straight away. We can analyze and we can extract the result like accurately, or maybe accuracy will be higher. Whereas if you go to very random events or random phenomena where your time is very small, so those things we usually model with explicit analysis. So here we consider the time inertial effects also along with the times. So time also we study here. This is just a brief I have given just to give you the clarity, like where we use implicit analysis and where we can go with the explicit analysis. Of course, there are problems where we can use both analysis, like implicit also can be done and explicit also can be done. Only thing is how you are interpreting the result, and how you are applying the boundary conditions sometimes matters. So here, like just for the explanation, I have used implicit. I have just compared like how implicit and explicit like we analyze or we study. So here I have one single degree of freedom system. So this is simple system. This figures and all looks complicated, little bit complicated, but that is a very simple equation of motion. If you see, this is MA, that is your damper forces, and that is your spring forces, and that is your total forces. So basically, what we are doing is, if you just look at this image here on the left hand side, if you see, this is your mass block and it is attached with some stiffness of spring and some damping coefficient of the damper. And then we are just applying a forces, that is external force on this body. So how it will behave, or what it will do. So if you see the free body diagram of this body, we have elastic force, we have damping force, we have external force. And according to D'Alembert law, we are using inertial forces also. We are having the inertial effect also. So equilibrium, if you establish, then your inertial force plus your damping force plus your elasticity force will give you the external force which you are going to apply on the system. So just to replace all these things, you have your M, A, then C, V, and then your K into X is equals to your force. So when you say implicit analysis, we don't have a role of time dependency is not there. So when it is implicit, you simply can see this equation here. Force is equals to Kx. So when it is force is equals to Kx and you are doing the implicit analysis, the idea is to check sum of all forces should be equals to 0. So this equation, this analysis, this idea we take and we analyze, we look for convergence and all. So this let's suppose this is F is equals to Kx. So here if you have F, is this one is your matrix, stiffness matrix, and this is your displacement. So if you put your displacement, let's suppose you want to extract the displacement of your analysis, or maybe in your analysis. So your simply K matrix will go to this side, and it will be like in a inverse of K. So when this matrix is inversed, it will take like another complex phenomena and tedious equations to solve, and that sometimes take some time, and even some resources are required to like calculate these inversions of the matrix. Then here, if you see for the explicit analysis, we have MA, then C and your velocity terms, and then your K into delta into X, and then your force. So here what we see is sum of all forces is equals to mass time acceleration. Okay, so here we simply go for solving for the acceleration. So your mass matrix will come to this force bracket, and here it will be, let's suppose this is inverse matrix, and for explicit we generally even for all the cases we generally put mass matrix as a lump mass analysis. So then that matrix will become it will be like a diagonal matrix, and that can be easily solvable. So here why I explained all these things, just to give you a little bit of glimpse, like for implicit we generally go for sum of all forces is equals to 0, and for explicit we check for mass time acceleration will be your sum of all the forces. So here we check for acceleration, here we check for displacement, that too with the like matrix inversion and all these terms involved. Whereas here we don't have any matrix inversion, no complex operations and all, so no system of equations are there. And the integration method is always stable in this case, because we are not looking for any time step analysis and all these things. Whereas if you come to explicit analysis, you have a term called time step. Basically the integration method is only stable if the time step size is smaller than the critical time step. When I say critical time step, why this quantity is coming, so that is now we will discuss in the next slide. So let us suppose let us suppose here we have one element, and let's suppose the speed of wave in this equation is something. How we will calculate that? That is different formulas are there for different calculation for elements. But why we consider this speed of sound in this medium or something? So why? Because let's suppose in analysis in the algorithm we are computing displacement at this point, and for the next subsequent step we are evaluating this node. So the stress wave by the time stress wave has traveled here, then only if you have like if solver, my solver, there are two terms here. One is solver time, another one is my the stress wave or the wave which is traveling in this medium. So let us suppose shock has happened and my stress wave has traveled from here to here within X time. And if my solver has reached this point within like before X, then that system becomes unstable because we cannot get the displacement or forces at this location before my solver before my stress wave reaches to that point. So we need to, for the stable calculation, we need to have solver time lesser than this stress reaching time. So that is the time is known as your critical time. So how we can find that time? So that will totally, as from this equation, it's this figure itself, you can see that the time step will depend on this length and will be depending on the speed of that sound wave. So for if you see for the sound wave, we have E by rho. So if you put for beam, for shell, this is for the like for simplification, we are putting it as a E by rho. So if you see here, your delta T will be directly depending on your length and your rho, and it will be inversely proportional with your Young's modulus. So for increasing your time step in the analysis, either you can remeshing, you can use remeshing, or you can use higher length element, or you can put additional virtual mass on your system. So that's where term comes mass scaling, that I will explain in the subsequent slide. So either you can decrease your stiffness of the system. Generally, E of a material is fixed. So what we can do is to control your analysis, we can put your rho and you can remesh these two quantities, you can vary. So as we have seen, for stabilizing your time step, you have mass scaling. So there I have told you two things are there. One is your like your wave is traveling and the reaching time for the wave is, let's suppose, your critical time step, and the time which from here to here, like reaching from this wave, this algorithm of software from here to here also requires some time. So that time should always be lesser than with this time. Okay, but now let's suppose how much less this time step should be and how much this time step should be. This so we have seen, like from here we can get this value, but how to address this time step, like from your algorithm or maybe time traveled for the computation into your element. So there comes some mass scaling. Let's suppose your time step, it is actually a varying quantity. When your deformation will happen, your length also will vary. So based on your time step of that particular element will vary. So then how we will actually control the time step? So there comes mass scaling. So let's suppose you have defined in your organization, or maybe let's suppose you have done some analysis like I have this much resources and I want to complete this simulation within this time zone, or maybe this time frame. So then you will get some idea that my time step of this analysis should be this much. Then what you can do, let's suppose your element time step is lesser than that time, the one which you have decided. Then you activate mass scaling. So what a mass scaling will do, it will virtually add some mass to your element, and it will move your time step to that particular element so that to satisfy the condition. So here simply the consideration points are like it is pure numerical approach, modifies physics of the problem. How it will modify? It will simply virtually add some mass. If it is adding some mass, your kinetic energy of that mass of that particular problem will get increased. But how, till which limit I can increase? I can only increase if I'm doing dynamic analysis. I can go up to 5% of the mass addition. Like I can only add 5%. And if I'm doing quasi static analysis, I can go till 20%, but that too will be problem specific. So these two are thumbs rule which we generally follow. So mass scaling basically increases inertia forces because it is adding mass into the system. So just to improve your time step. Those things I will explain in upcoming slide. This is just for your basic building. Okay, then mass scaling must be limited due to non-physical behavior. Why I say non-physical? Because this is not a realistic phenomena. What you are doing is you are virtually putting some mass to increase your time step so that your analysis should not fail. Okay, so this is a little bit on a mass scaling side. Now I'll simply jump into the dynamic analysis of your frame. So first of all, I'll give some intro is like we have to check the structural integrity of your FE frame, and analysis done here is like explicit analysis, that too on a frontal load case. So the frame meshing will be was done on a 5 mm, and we have used shell mesh with 5 integration point throughout its thickness. When I say 5 integration points, I will in upcoming slide I will explain the benefit of this 5 integration points. Okay, so now this is the setup. So basically, we here also you can see the frame of your FE cycle, and this is the meshed view of that frame. Okay, and then the next step is we have to define some wall so that implementation can be done on that particular wall. So here we have included one wall to define the collision between your frame and the wall. So then now comes how software will understand that there is a wall, or it might have infinite stiffness. How it will understand? So then you have to define some contact definition. Contact, when I say contact is basically something which will enable the software, which will enable the solver to, it will tell that this is these two bodies are there which cannot interpenetrate. So that's where the contact is needed. When you define the contact, it will while reaching to that point, it will understand, okay, yes, there is a wall, or which may have infinite stiffness. So accordingly we have to, either we cannot pass this, the basically the main idea. And then we have defined the boundary conditions. We have even, and yeah, one more thing, fixed support to the wall. We have to fix the wall so that it will behave as a rigid wall scenario. So now we have defined the boundary conditions and we have applied the boundary conditions also. Then like we have to define some bound velocity conditions like as an initial condition. So initially this frame will have, let's suppose 35 kilometer per hour or maybe 50 kilometer per hour based on your application, or maybe the maximum speed of your vehicle. So based on that we define the initial velocity. So with this velocity, from the very initial moment of the simulation itself, it will start moving with this initial velocity, and after some time it will hit this wall, and then we can understand like how the deformations are coming, what modifications we have to do. So both things we will analyze. So as you can see, in the middle we have wall with the isometric view of frame and the wall. This is your side view, this is your rear view, and this is your top view. And here in the lower end, I have explained like how velocity condition we have implemented on the frame. So this is the animation of your initially of the initial of the single, your frame started moving, and at reaching the wall, it has can be addressed. Let's suppose if that is hampering your result analysis, you can fix the deformation only in x. You can give the velocity only in x direction based. So purpose. So can put your part transformation. You can define, let's suppose you want to translate or rotate that and all, you can do here. And same way you can adjust your wall also here. So let's suppose we have imported the wall and the frame here. So with both things, now you have to, since this is dynamic analysis, that will come only in while, let's suppose your vehicle is traveling, or maybe you are analyzing in a real life scenario. So you have to give some point mass which is representing your driver's weight. So that I have simply put, because these four members were going to share for the seating arrangement. So I have just simply distributed the point mass to these four locations. Otherwise, you can have like artificially vary your CG and all to like input the this point mass to represent the driver weight and all. So because that will also play a role in this analysis. So let us suppose you have defined the point mass. You have same way here. One setting you have to do. Let's suppose you have opened your you have imported your surface or the wall. Here you have to put the stiffness behavior of your wall to rigid from flexible. Flexible is like it will have it will deform and it will have stresses and strains. But if you put it as a rigid, it will behave as a rigid body, which will not deform. So while after defining this here rigid body and defining the material and thickness of your frame, let's suppose you have varying thickness, you have to put different this thing. Let's suppose you have varying thickness. Let's suppose I have varying thickness for these members, and then these and all are different thickness. So what I have done is I have defined the thickness and material, and what I have done is I have in the design or maybe space claim itself, I have shared the topology of these parts here, so that my mesh should have the continuous this thing. It should not have any discontinuity. So mesh will be connected only. So after defining frame and material, you go to connections. Here, for the simplicity purpose, I have just demonstrated use of only body interaction. When I say body interaction, it is something like a self contact. Self contact as in this will consider all the bodies in the model. The contact between, if let's suppose some interaction is happening between one or two bodies, it will consider within the contact. Let's suppose here, let's suppose there is a curvature, but if it is straight member, and if it is straight and it would have collided with this and it got crushed. If it is crushing, even the self, what do you call, the self surface of the frame, if it is colliding with its own surface, that also will be taken care by this body interaction. That is why it is known as body interaction. So, and another thing I want to highlight here, if you want to interact, if you want to understand the force which is transferring between this wall to the frame. So for that, what you can do is you can define one contact between these two separately. Like if you can put insert, you can put manual contact region, and then you can define here. You can change the setting to bonded from bonded to frictional. So basically now what it will do, it will have interaction between these two parts, that too with frictional, or you can put some frictional coefficient, and then in the end you can extract that result as a force output. So that also you can do. Like if you want to understand how much the force is transferring from this body to this body, individual forces, with a probe you can extract. So after defining the connections, you can simply mesh it. So meshing, now you can see I have here very varying sizes mesh. So the frame I have meshed in 5 mm, whereas you can see this one is like a little bit coarser mesh. Why I have done this? The idea is, let us suppose I have meshed this body also with the same mesh size, then the solver will take like more time to solve the model, because this body also has very fine mesh, which is not our area of interest. Second point, this is rigid body. So if I am putting it as a small finely meshed or coarser mesh, this will not make any difference for this rigid body. So that's why, based on my analysis, I have taken the judgment to put this body as a coarser mesh and this body as a rigid mesh. How you can do that? Like after meshing, you can just simply right click here and freeze the mesh. So after freezing the mesh, this part will not be meshed further. And for this analysis, you can further remesh it to more finer mesh. So this is one point I wanted to highlight. So after meshing, you can check your CFL time step. The same thing I have explained. The CFL time step will tell you, let's suppose this model will, if you run it without any mask scaling, or simply if you run it, it will run with this time step, 8.9 e raised to minus 7. And you can see the distribution of time step, how it is distributed, like here and all it is same, whereas in this area and all it is different. It is also, again, it is little bit on a higher side. So that way you can on the lower side, I would say. So that way you can decide and yeah, that way you can decide whether you want to increase your mesh size based on your desired time step, or you want to more fine mesh you can do. So that's what I one more thing, and then you just go with the simple window here. In the initial condition, you just put the velocity, and velocity you give as a like whatever, like some 35 or 40 kmph you want to explain, that you can put in the system. That window. 1 second. Okay, outline, tree filter, float.
Mike, it should be in home reset layout.
Reset where?
In the yeah, just after the
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So basically here in the velocity, you can put your like whatever, like some unit system you are following. If it is in kg, then you have to put it in second or maybe millisecond, whatsoever the unit system which you are following. So the velocity and all you have put, and after giving the velocity, you have to define, as I have explained, we have to put the boundary conditions, fixed support as for window, and here you have to define the section. From the LS-DYNA window, you can put the section, and in this section you can define like how many number of integration point you want along the thickness. So this is your integration point. Here you have from 0.1 to 0.9, and you are using 0.5. Why I am using 0.5, I will explain in the next slide, like after this demo. So after defining section also, and you can simply go to solution phase. You can start solving from here. And if you have multiple cores in your system, then you can control those things from here, like your number of CPUs and all you can define. Another thing is, which I have discussed earlier, if you want to give your time step, then you can put automatic mask scaling on. Otherwise, it will be on no condition. You can just put it yes, and you can define your time step. After defining this time step, you will just put solution and solve. While solving, you will see this window. In the solution information, you can see solver output. So when I say solver output, it will write what it is doing inside the like in the background. So this will write all the warnings and errors. So if it is error, you can easily find out those errors from here. So after, let's suppose you have put the solver output, you can check added mass, how much the mass it has added and how much is the physical mass. And you can check the ratio. This ratio should be lesser than 5%. Currently it is okay. So this mass you have to check, like if it is adding very high mass, then you have to again reduce your time step from here. You have to further reduce. Let's suppose I have used 0.6, then you have to use 0.7 or 0.8 based on CFL analysis. And if you're not using this setting from here, like if it is no, then your solver will follow this time step. But in the analysis for the safer side, we have put safety factor of 0.9. So with this time step into multiplied by 0.9, solver will follow this time step. Okay, so I would just suggest you please play with these parameters. Like you use mass scaling, time step, vary the time step. You check without mass scaling, check with mass scaling how much time it is taking and how much mass it is adding with this from here, and find out your optimum time step. And then with that optimum time step, you try to run the analysis and then compare without time step. So that will give you a proper understanding how these things work. And same thing you can put from solver information. From solver information, you can put added mass, and you can scope that to particular component. Let's suppose one body, you want to understand how the effect is happening. So this is the added mass. Previously, it has started from 3.93 and then it has moved to till 4.04 kg. So this is the mass. It got added into the dynamically into the simulation. Since why this is adding dynamically, because the over the simulation also your length of the elements are varying because the deformations are coming. So for stabilizing the time step for all these cycles, the dynamically mass it is adding into the system. So same way you can put deformation, you can check for the stresses, and then you can end up with this this kind of animation, and you can check whether the analysis is correct or not. If it is yawing too much, then you can fix this axis also, and then you can check whether how much the deformation is coming. And then let's suppose after animation checking, you are pretty much okay with the animation, then you have to do energy checks. So basically here, as I have explained from that window itself, like from this solution information, you can access your energy summary. So in the energy summary, you can understand like the phenomena should be realistic. Here you will have your kinetic energy. Here you will have your internal energy. So let's suppose at this point your simulation has started and it has some x kinetic energy. After collision, your kinetic energy will keep on decreasing and your internal energy will keep on increasing. Why? Because this energy is basically a material energy, which is there because you have defined some material. So your system will store some energy that it will release from in the form of heat and all that is not being captured here. But kinetic energy is like this, and your internal energy will be like this. So when let's suppose this is decreasing and this is increasing, then you will understand like how your phenomena, and after some time it will, let's suppose after this it will become, it's stabilized after this like this. So your analysis is okay. And then Here, the second check you want to do is kinetic energy. You will check based on your hand calculation. You will understand you will calculate your mass of the whole vehicle or maybe frame or maybe analysis, and then that you will do half mv square and you will understand the kinetic energy how much it should come, and if it is matching with this value, then your like initialization phase is correct, and you then the rest thing will depend on your the energy distribution, how the curves are coming. And then third point check is you have to check the contact energy and hourglass energy. Hourglass energy is a phenomena which I think you can go through, you can take reference from textbook, and on the net it is very well explained. You can understand from there. And contact energy is like the contact which we have defined, that like how it is interacting. If it is penetrating, it will add on some pseudo energy. So the computation of those energy will come here. So let us suppose this energy, this green color is showing your contact energy. If it is becoming like this, if it is going like this, the trend is like this, then there is some issue with the simulation. And if it is very less, then you can go ahead with this. Then this analysis looks okay, and you can correlate with your hand calculation and your animation. If everything looks okay, you can go ahead with the with the results which you are getting from these stresses and dynamics, like deformations. One more thing I have explained here was like I have used section thickness integration points. Why I need those integration points? So let us suppose this is your section, okay, and this is the cross section I'm telling, and the middle one is your neutral axis. When I say I have 3 integration points, 3 integration point means one at the neutral axis, another one is at a top axis, and another one is at a just a minute. Another one is at a top layer, and like 3 points are there here. So this will, if it in case of pure bending, this can capture. But when I say when we have elastic and plastic bending, so in that case you will have issue, because this is like a linear curve. If you have elastic, then you have to put more integration points to capture the phenomena. So here let's suppose you have elastic deformation and then bending also there. So those cases, if it is linear, then let's suppose your stress is coming here or somewhere here, this integration point at these 2 locations will not capture those things. Then you have to increase the integration points. So let's suppose you have added one here, one here, one here, one here, then you can capture your elastic and plastic bending. One more case is there, like let's suppose you have bending and stretching, this kind of phenomena, then how you will understand. And another thing is, if let's suppose you have pulled it and then after some time it has some spring back, because sheet metal parts always have some spring back. So if you have a spring back, then this kind of stress formation will come, stress distribution will come. Then how you will like capture all those things. So for those cases we have number of integration points. So if you have 3 number of integration points, if you have 4, 5, 7, so these many number of integration points are there. So why I pick 5 is like I can capture pure bending, I can capture elastic and plastic bending, and then I can capture bending and stretching. Since I'm not basically focusing on spring back, so I have not used 7 or so on. So basically 5 can capture these two cases pretty well, and this one it can capture without any error. So that's why I have used, you can even try with the 7, like to check whether your result are varying or not. So that was pretty much with the basics and dynamic analysis. Now if we have any questions, we can discuss.
Good evening, sir. Sir, could you please explain why you've used the 0.5 grade in the meshes for the animation that you've demonstrated?
Please come again.
So you've used a 0.5 grade mesh, right?
Yeah. 0.5, no, 5 mm mesh I have used.
Okay, yeah, what you've shown in the answers window. Can you explain why you've used it?
Why I have used 5 mm. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so basically we actually before selecting this 5 mm, we do mesh convergence study. Okay, we try with 50 mm, we try with 10 mm, we try with 5 mm, we try with 4 mm. So let us suppose I have big gap between 10 and 50. I have started with 50, I have big gap with 10, then I have big gap with 20, 9, 8 or 7. So so the curve will look something like this. Give me 1 second. Let me just open the PPT itself. So the curve will come like this. Is it not writing anything? Can you see?
Sir, it's not writing, so it's giving.
Okay, no problem. So basically, the curve will come something like this. Initially, the gap will be big. Let's suppose this is for 50 mm. Forgive my writing. Okay. Then we have 10 mm, or maybe you put 20 mm. Then we have 10 mm. Okay. Then we have little bit on a 6 or maybe 5. Then you have 4. Okay, so as you can see from 5 to 4, I could see very less difference in stresses or deformation. Okay, but my from 5 to 4, my element size, element number of elements and number of nodes are increasing. Okay, that will again further increase the time to run the analysis. Okay, as you have seen, the this characteristic length of this element also has an effect on time step. Okay, so when this, let's suppose this gap is not big and my calculation time is considerably high, then I have to conclude on 5 that my I cannot see much difference or considerable difference between stresses and deformation, whereas my time running time is increasing considerably. So I should analyze on 5 mm size. You understood the idea?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got it, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Any other question? Like the explanation which I have given in explicit analysis was clear to you, or it was like little bit on a higher side? Be frank, so that I can like maybe add something or give you some resources or references so that you can understand it pretty well. Aniket, which part? Like, could you just give me a brief, like where and all you felt it was a bit high for you?
Sir, the last part.
Last part is in where I have explained the integration points.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Like apart from that, dynamic analysis, the process and the procedure and the time step concept was pretty much okay,
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir. Time step concept, I had doubts.
Okay, please go ahead.
So time step concept was not clear.
Okay, you want me to go to explain in like just touch upon this again?
Yes, sir. Please, if you can.
Okay, okay. So basically, let us again go back and see the time step concept. So basically, what I wanted to explain is here. Let us suppose you have one element here, okay, and there are you all, I think you all are aware what we are doing in the simulation or in the solver in the background. Solver does some algorithm it has some algorithm that keep on running. When you give the analysis the settings, no, it will form mathematically the equations, and then it will keep on solving those equations till the end time. So let's suppose from 0 you have started and your simulation time is some 50 millisecond or something. So from 0 to 50 it will keep on simulating or keep on solving your algorithm. So now you have to tell this algo or maybe this algorithm, like how at which what do you call, at which, like how much time step it should consider to move on to the next element. You understood? Let's suppose this is one element, and again you have another element connected along with this. Okay, so this one is, let's suppose this is element number 2. So your solver will start from here, and it has to go from here to here. Then only it can give you the result of the element, what is happening. Let's suppose this particular element has crushed, or it is rigid, or it has transferred all the deformation to this node. How it will tell? Until and unless it calculates all the your mathematical formulation, it will apply one formulation here, and then after some time it will go to this node, and then again it will apply some formulation here. So the time your solver takes from this node to this node is your delta t. That is your time step. That this same time step will be like it will tell your algorithm that okay, you have applied here, you have got these values of deformation, these values of this, these values of stresses. Now after this time you go to this node, and you again compare you again apply the same equations here, and then you again tell me the result in the form of the format which you have given here. Okay, so here also again it will tell you the same thing, but here the catch is this time, the time which is taken by algorithm to reach from here to here should be lesser than the shock wave. Let's suppose you have applied some force. So this force, the effect of this force should reach this node before this time, before the time taken by the algorithm to compute here and here. Because what will happen now? If this force will not reach here, and your algorithm will reach here, then here will not, you will not have any effect because of this force. Then you don't have any, like what are you solving for? That is where the question arises. Like so one time is like this node, the solver is calculating here, and then again it is calculating here. So what it is calculating here is the effect of this force. Like if it has reached here, then only if it is calculating, then then your result will be reflected all the forces, the effects and all because of this force. So now, so that's where I told you that here you have CFL time. So CFL time will tell you, let's suppose you have your element is solid, then you have to follow this C, and you have to put L divided by under root of this portion here. That will give you your elemental time step. That the time which will be taken by stress wave from here to here. Okay, so when you get this time, your solver will understand, okay, this is the threshold value. Till this point I have to reach here. Okay, fine, I will go and I will roam somewhere here, and then I will reach here. If it is known, then it is okay. Otherwise, if it is not known, this solver, this algorithm doesn't know when this effect of these forces will come here, and when he will go and calculate. So that's where the concept of CFL times comes. And this is simply the formulation which is required to, this is simply a formula which you can calculate, and then you can understand. So now, again, one more thing, I think mass scaling is clear, no, after time step? Aniket?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So now it is okay, you understood little bit idea what it is
Yes,
doing?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Sir, that means the time step multiplied by total number of nodes, it will give us the time for computing the problem, sir.
No. Time step is like a single quantity. Let's suppose you have, I would say, I have an example. Let's suppose one guy is there in your class, okay, who has a height of 5'3", okay, and and other guys have 6'2", 6'3". So, but let's suppose if I ask what is the shortest height in your class, what you will tell? You will tell 5'3" only. Understood? So that 5'3" will decide the height in your classroom. That 5'3" is the lowest. Same way in the element also. Let's suppose this guy has time step of 1 e raised to minus 9. Okay, and this guy has somewhere around, let's suppose, 2 e raised to minus 6. Until and unless the stress wave transfer from this element, then only it will reach here. No, so it has to move at this pace, then only it will reach here. So this element time step is very crucial. Either we can increase this time step, or we can add on some random virtual mass, so that this time step should increase, and then you will have a constant time step of 2 raised to minus 6. So here the idea is, if a single element also has the time step which is very less, so the same time step will be driven by the simulation will be driven by only this time step, the smallest one. You understood this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other doubt?
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Sir, since you have explained about the time step, so means that the time step will change from any two nodes. Like it will not be the same for all the nodes, isn't it?
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. So basically, the time step is driven by element. That's where that's where I have said, no, we have a concept of mass scaling. So if let's suppose a single element has lesser time step, and you have given globally a big time step here in the analysis setting, a big time step. Let's suppose you have given 1 e raised to minus 6, and a single element of yours, this one, has a time step of e raised to minus 9. So either solver will add some mass here just to make this time step e raised to minus 6. Otherwise, if you are not dynamically adding mass, then the simulation has to run with this pace, 1 e raised to minus 9.
Okay.
Yeah, understood now?
Yes, sir.
I have one question here in chat box, like Shurbi Sumanya. Sir, is the collision between curve member and the wall more favorable than a straight member and a wall? It depends. Like if you have what do you call, if you have curve member in your dynamics, or maybe if it is triangle, if it is straight, that the only thing is how it is distributing the force. If your curve member are more realistically, or maybe more favorably transferring your stresses or your forces from one point to another, then that would be favorable than the straight line, because a straight line will always have it will always have your rigid kind of phenomena. Like let's suppose you are getting force from straightly from front side, and that will directly be transferred to the rear end of the part. That's where we have seen our automobile chassis are something like this. This is, let's suppose this is the bigger member, and then you have small internal members. This is what we call it ladder chassis. So when the impact comes from here, from this side, if the impact is coming from this side, this will be distributed throughout these are your main load path carrying member. These two. And the cross members are just adding stiffness or maybe torsional stiffness to this chassis. I hope it is clear to you. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in case of mass scaling, whether it will contribute to changes in the material properties?
No. I have explained this earlier also, that E is material property. That is not gonna change. So only thing you can change is either you can remesh it. Let's suppose you have very small characteristic length, which is actually driving your simulation time step. Then either you can remesh your element and then make this L considerable, or you can add on some mass. You can virtually add some mass, which is being done by solver itself. So only you can change is your L. either you can remesh or solver will add some mass. So that mass you have to check whether it is realistic. Let's suppose it has added some 3 or 4 kg, then that will not be realistic on a single part. The part is of 200 grams and solver has added 500 kg. So that is not at all realistic. It will also change your phenomena. So that's where
Okay,
you have
sir.
to take. That's where you have to take a this thing call whether you want to go for mass scaling or you want to go for lesser time step or you want to go for remeshing.
Okay, clear, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. One more question from Josna we have here. Sir, can you please explain damping and erosion controls? So see, erosion are something like when you have what do you call in your analysis, sometimes analysis become unstable or your elements, let's suppose solid elements are there and they are failing because of negative volume. When I say negative volume, let's suppose this is element and you are applying load from this phase. Sorry, you're applying load from this phase and this phase becomes you when you have applied this load, this element got crushed and this length, the one which is on a this side, this length has gone to this point. I would say I will use this. Yeah. So this length has come to this point. Now, from the simulation point of view, this element is like having negative volume because your initial length from here, it has traveled till here. So now it has zero length element, and then it will either go beyond this, or if some part of this element has come to this point. So this will become unstable. Negative volume it will throw and it will become unstable. So for deleting those elements and all, so we use erosion controls. It will erode all those elements which are actually meeting the criteria which we have defined for element erosion. So it will delete all those elements from the analysis. That is what erosion does. And the damping is like let's suppose when you have vibration, because let's suppose when you put some you have this thing, when you are dropping a component, then in the solver you will have enormous amount of energy which is going to be distributed into the system based on the mass and stiffness. And with due to some parameters, some stiffness or maybe some penetrations are there into the system, you will get some penetration energy also. So that energy sometimes it redistribute itself. So while redistributing, it will vibrate the parts. So while vibrating, it will not give you proper acceleration or maybe displacement. So for those cases, you can put damping on those parts. What it will do, it will damp the unwanted oscillations into the part or maybe into the analysis. Even let's suppose this here you have this kind of vibration, and if you are putting damping, so it will smoothen this curve also sometimes. So that way damping you can use into the result also, and you can use into the system, like some part you have dropped, some part are being dropped from some height, and while dropping it is having somewhat this kind of wavy nature. So while implementing the damping, you can correct these kind of numerical errors. I hope this answers your question, Jyotsna. Thank you for the confirmation. Any other question do we have here? Or shall we conclude? Any other question, if it is there for Jaisan, related to static? Okay, maybe what we can do is when you put your hands, when you get this hands-on experience on this analysis and all, if you have any query or any question, you can always reach out to us, me and Jaisan. Both will be there to help you out. And we have already shared our mail IDs with you. You can always write out to us, and then we would be happy to help you. Shall we conclude, Jason?
Yes, Mayank.
Okay, then if we don't have any question, Bharat is there. Hello, Bharat.
Hi, Manksan. Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, so Bharat, shall we conclude then if we don't have any questions, any queries?
Yeah, seems like the students are done with it, and maybe they could have understood the things, or either the other way around. Both can be possible.
Okay.
But yes, just for them. But I know that since you guys have done a good job and you have tried to explain each and everything, I'll be sharing the meeting video which we have recorded, and maybe later on you can reiterate yourself. We can restudy the things that Jason and Mayank-san have taught you, and maybe it will help you later on once you are doing the hands-on experience with the software itself.
Sure. Jason, one more information from from our ANSYS side. Like whosoever is interested in taking the software, we would like to collect the list of students, like list of teams or maybe the participating students, and then we can start the process of dispatching the licenses for them.
Right. So what we can do is that before we have the peak attendance in the next session, we'll be trying and conducting the poll in between, that it will give a little bit break and we can collect the data as well. Since the attendance at this moment is low, so it's better that we go on doing it in the middle of the event, when I think that we had approximately 120 members this time.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Jason, you were adding something?
No, nothing from my side, Mayank.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, then thank you so much, Mayank-san, Jay-san, for giving your precious time, and to all the students who have shown their interest in this session. So keep on and keep up with this good work to all of you, and have all the best for the session. And we'll be meeting again on 26th.
Yeah.
Mayank-san? Yeah.
27th.
So, okay, 27th.
Yep.
So I'll be sharing the details as on 27th itself, and see you guys again with the latest, the best simulation practices. This is what the agenda will be.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Prasan.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
And listening patiently. Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.